Hey, what's going on YouTube? Today I'm going to be showcasing my Smite Armor Stacker build that I spent the past few days working on. This is easily the most tankiest build I think I've made. Its hit damage, its hit survival rate is something that is, in my opinion, unmatched. Unless you're running specifically a build that is designed to tank and only deal like a million damage, for instance, like the Valdos builds, the Void builds. As an all-arounder build with a high DPS count, this build can survive some of the biggest hits in the game, including an Adziri Flame Blast that is 3 to 4 possessed Tormented Spirits. And it does that because there's a charm that was introduced into the league that grants you 3% of armor applies to fire, cold, and lightning damage taken from hits. Now, when you're armor stacking and you have 9 million armor, that is 60,000 damage prevented, basically. It makes you practically immune to elemental damage. And you pair that with 90% fire, cold, and lightning resistance. And yeah, you're pretty much immune to elemental hits. We're then converting some of that elemental damage, or so that we're then converting physical damage to elemental damage as well. About 40% of it is being converted, and then we have 100% spell suppression and 24% attack block chance. So overall, the build can survive a hit. It can survive many hits. It can survive many strong hits without really batting an eye at it. The build suffers a little bit from degens, as most builds do. It can't survive a 3 to 4 possessed Tormented Shaper Beam, for example, but it can survive standing on burning ground for a long period of time. It can survive being affected by bleed. It can survive a normal Shaper Beam for at least some amount of time, especially if you're attacking an enemy or multiple enemies while getting hit by it. But mainly the build survives hits. And then degens you just kind of have to avoid, or if it's not that bad of a degen, you're probably fine. But yeah, the build has 9 million armor, and paired with all that defense, it has 197 million hit DPS. And that is not including the 15% culling strike that it has with the Eternal Struggle Onyx Amulet, making this not only a defensive powerhouse, but also an offensive powerhouse. The build is Chaos Inoculation, making it immune to chaos damage, which I feel like you kind of need for a build to feel really tanky these days, unless you're using something like Defiance of Destiny plus Progenesis plus Petrified Blood or something like that. It feels like you almost need to have Chaos Inoculation if you're going Energy Shield in order to handle Chaos hits and Chaos degens. For the Pantheons, we're using Ralakesh small Pantheon so that we can have less damage taken while moving from bleed. It is extremely powerful for Chaos Inoculation builds because physical dot and physical damage over time effects are a little too strong, because Chaos Inoculation has a notorious rep for being really bad with fizz hits, because your fizz hit and your fizz mitigation is partially dependent on how much life you have. And when your total life is 1, it definitely makes it difficult. And then for the big Pantheon, we're running our Akali Pantheon to help with that damage over time. The skill tree is quite simple. It's just go to the cluster jewel areas, put on voices, and get 9 introspection jewels on. And then the rest of the tree is just going to aura effect, a few jewel sockets, a few important keystones, and 1 spell suppression wheel to cap our spell suppression. For the ascendancies, we're just running Necromancer and Champion for that aura effect. And then we're running a Forbidden Flesh, Forbidden Flame Raider for a chance to suppress spell damage, as well as getting free Onslaught at full frenzy charges, since we are running a quartz flask instead of a silver flask in this build. And this also grants us phasing, and we get some extra chance to generate frenzy charges when we hit unique and rare enemies. Now, I figured out that through some testing that this was not enough frenzy charge generation, so we have it on a charm as well. The Raider Ascendancy is capping our spell suppression and feels really comfortable and really useful for the build. This build was also one of the most expensive builds I made, and I appreciate Whimsy for helping me pay for the build. As he is kind of done with the league, he has helped me work on some very expensive projects and experiments. So thank you, Whimsy, again for all that you've done for me this league and leagues in the past. You're always a lot of fun to play with, and I really appreciate all you do for me. And then thank you, Turtle, for the spell suppression tech on the tree. That is something that I did not see until he helped me out, and it made a huge difference. So thank you to Turtle 420 for that as well. So the build runs 2 replica Dream Feathers. They're both double corrupted for melee hits Fortify, and then one has Resolute Technique so that we don't have to worry about our accuracy. Then we're running, for the helmet, we're running Glyph Cowl Hubris Circlet, which is just the best aura helmet that you can get. And then we're running Rift Shelter Grasping Mail, which is just the armor stacker Grasping Mail with global defenses, so it's the best for energy shield stacking builds or chaos inoculation versions. And then it has, you know, armor and evasion rating is overcapped, is benefited by overcapped fire and cold res. And then it's just a bunch of fire and cold res as well. And then, of course, Grace Effect, Non-Curse Aura Effect, and increased explicit resistance modifiers to help boost that DPS even further, because we want our armor and evasion to go as high as possible so that we have as much attack damage scaling as possible. For the gloves, we're running a very painstakingly made pair of gloves. It has tier 1 fire and cold resistance with fractured energy shield, increased attack speed, tier 2 increased energy shield, and then +2 AoE gems, unveil. So it is a 6 mod. There is no benchcraft on this. The 6th mod, where the benchcraft would have been 74% increased energy shield, but instead I went for a Hinakora's Exalt for the last energy shield mod. All I wanted was tier 2 plus, or pretty much anything that was going to beat the crafting bench mod. We then, for the implicits, ahead of time rolled for vendor implicit, so the gilded fossil implicit, so that we could later on Hinakora's corrupt on +2 AoE or +2 aura gems on the gloves. So the implicits of the gloves are +2 AoE with lightning exposure on hit and non-val strike strikes 2 additional targets. So very insane pair of gloves. We're then running +2 AoE, +2 aura, March of the Legion. It was this or +1 all +2 AoE or +1 all +2 aura. They all do the same amount of levels to your grace skill. That's basically the March of the Legion best corrupts. So we just picked out of the hat which one was the best. For the amulet, we have 16% increased non-curse aura effect from your skills, with Hinakora's corrupted determination aura effect on Eternal Struggle. We're then getting a lot of extra stats, which is helping us fill out our strength requirements and giving us a lot of extra global defenses, so extra armor, and then we're getting extra energy shield as well, and then we're getting a lot of intelligence, which is also boosting our energy shield. And then we get that 15% or lower life on hit culling strike, so it's a buffed culling strike. It's insane. For the ring, we're running Foe Grasp Coral Ring. It's just the best armor stacker mirror tier ring that you can get. And then we're running a Calandra's Touch alongside it. We're then running a double corrupted Mage Blood with Grace Aura effect and attack speed, with good resistance rolls and decent dexterity, although the dexterity stat really doesn't matter. We were only worried about decent res rolls, Grace Aura effect, and then something else that was useful in the implicits. For the flasks, we're running Taste of Hate for more fizz damage mitigation, as well as a small amount of fizz damage convert to cold, although mainly we're using it for the fizz taken as cold. And then we're using a Jade Flask, Quartz Flask, Basalt Flask, and Stibnite Flask with reduced mana cost, additional elemental resistances, increased armor and increased evasion. For the jewels, the main one that I also want to point out is the Watcher's Eye. We have a lot of Fizz taken as on the Watcher's Eye, as well as ES on hit. And that ES on hit is actually doing a tremendous amount of work at combating degens in particular. Since we're basically invincible to hits, it does only matter for that situation where you're degenning or you have an applied degen, and your best bet is to just attack the enemy and try to heal from them to combat that degen. And then we're running 8 mirrored small cluster jewels, all the Dusk Splinter, 3 passive small cluster jewels, triple implicit, insane cluster jewel. We're running 8 of them, and then we're running 2 passive small cluster jewel with fire resistance and strength to fill out our strength requirements, and then introspection and increased effect, of course. For the charms, we're running a suppressed charm with utility flasks applied to you have increased effect. Now, for some reason, the magic utility flasks applied to you have increased effect has a bug in POB where it brings all of your max hits up. So it's bringing my Fizz max hit, my fire max hit, my cold and lightning max hit. It's bringing those numbers up, but it's dropping my effective hit pool. So it doesn't make sense that my effective hit pool goes down when I buff flask effect. So we ruled it as it's probably a bug, but I should have actually about 1.5 million effective hit pool instead of 1.1 million. Other charms that we're running Frenzy on hit with cannot be stunned while fortified. Since we are getting fortification, this is our easiest way of getting stun immunity. Now, because our life total is 1 and we're running Chaos Inoculation, we have the same issue of our stun threshold is extremely low. So there's 2 ways to fix it. You either use Immutable Force or you get cannot be stunned somewhere else. So we use cannot be stunned while fortified to handle that. And then the last charm we have is increased evasion rating and energy shield on equipped helmet with increased mana reservation efficiency. This just helps us with our reservation a little bit. We only needed 8%, but I got a 12%er just because I figured it would resell better if I had to resell it. And then the increased evasion per 1 max energy shield on equipped helmet is a tremendous amount of increased DPS for us. So, and a decent amount of max hit. So that's what we're doing there. Our That Which Was Taken has 15% spell suppression so that we can fill out our spell suppression. It also has +2 to maximum fire res, which is capping us on our fire res because we would be at 88% if without it. And then we have the 3% of armor applies to fire, cold, and lightning taken from hits. That Which Was Taken was like really expensive, and I'm amazed it even exists. So what I'm trying to say is, sorry, but you probably won't get your hands on this. It's way too good. I'm amazed it exists. It's extremely rare. For the skills, it's pretty straightforward. It's just a bunch of auras. We're running Purity of Fire, Purity of Elements, Haste with Enlighten, and then we're running Discipline, Determination, and Wrath. And then in the boots, since we have Divine Blessing in the boots, level 25, we're putting Grace, Inspiration, and Power, and Defiance Banner in there. When you put a banner skill in the boots, it doesn't work with Divine Blessing. So it's an aura that you can run in the boots without having any downside. And then Grace is, of course, the aura that is getting affected by Divine Blessing. And that way we can pair Empower with 2 different auras. For the 6th link, it's just Smite, Multi-Strike, LE damage with attacks, Volatility, damage on full life, and Lightning Pen. The reason we're not running Elemental Focus is because shock damage is actually doing a lot for the build. We're getting that 50% shock effect because we are dealing so much damage. We are actually getting that enemies take 50% increased damage from shocks. So that's why we're not running LE Focus and we're running Lightning Pen instead. And then in the 2 weapons, we got Leap Slam, Vitality, and Molten Shell. And then Conductivity, Ancestral Protector, and Purity of Ice. Since we're not running Berserker, Forbidden Flash, or Flame, and we don't have Rage stacking in the gloves, we're not running Berserk at all in the build. Instead, we're running Ancestral Protector to help buff our attack speed in situations where we need to, like bossing. And then we have conductivity as well for bossing and single target damage. And yeah, that's generally the build make. Based on what you're seeing on screen, I hope you're convinced that this build is quite tanky and is able to survive basically anything. And I appreciate you guys coming and watching this showcase and seeing the potential of Armor Stacker. I want to make it clear that what I'm doing here is not giving people builds to try and make themselves. I'm trying to show people the science behind PoE and just how far things can get pushed before it reaches a maximum, basically. I have access and means to a lot of currency because I'm a mere tier crafter, and I am just trying to use that currency for good to show people uh, what you can do in the game and what is possible in PoE. I'm just trying to break walls and limits here. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. And I'll see you in the next one. All right. Take care.